Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's try and start. Sorry, it's such a tight schedule.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We are late. Next time we'll do better. Yes.
All right.
Okay, so my name is Andy McKay from the University of Sussex. I will chair this session in which we have 3 papers. We have very little time. We have to be complete. We definitely have to be finished by 1:45 or we don't get any lunch. So I ask the presenters to be as succinct as possible. I'll allow you your 20 minutes, but
20.
no more. If you can do it in less than 20 minutes, you get a bonus. And likewise, discussants, 5 minutes, and we'll see what time we have for questions and discussion. Sorry about this authoritarianism, but unfortunately we have to manage.
Yeah.
So our first presentation then is going to be by Joshua Abor at the University of Ghana. Up to 20 minutes, please, Joshua.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I was tough already.
Afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, So let me first of all thank SOAS, AERC and ODI for inviting me to present a paper I'm doing with the president of the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development. This is a multilateral development bank based in Togo, serving the ECOWAS sub-region. So the idea is to look at how green finance interact with institutional quality to explain sustainable economic growth. And we know that the OECD defines green finance as sources of finance from both public and private to, if you like, green the economy. So it's an aspect of the financial system that supports green investment. So the idea is to see how that interact with institutional quality to be able to support sustainable economic development. So the concept has been gaining prominence, and we've seen a number of papers coming up in the area of green finance, climate finance, sustainable finance. And it's important for us to understand how that can drive the sustainable development, because of course, we know from the SDG goal 11, goal 13, all talks about sustainable cities, we talk about climate finance or climate action. So we believe that it will be useful or very important to continue to drive research in this area. We think that green finance alone probably may not support sustainable development. You need strong institutions within the domestic economy to be able to support that. So the idea, as I indicated, is to see how that can support sustainable economic development. We also felt that it's important to look at the threshold effect because the relationship may not be linear. It may be something else, maybe an N shape, it might be a U shape. So it's important to understand that. Well, a number of studies have been carried out in terms of how strong institutions can explain economic growth. And we thought it's important to throw that variable in there. So in this study, this is what we did. First of all, to examine the effects of green finance and institutions on sustainable economic growth. Okay, so the first model looks at these as how they independently affect sustainable economic growth. And then we look at the threshold effect of sustainable finance. So if you start flowing in sustainable finance into an economy, does it immediately impact growth or it takes time? So that's why we needed to look at the threshold that could impact on growth. And then look at how institutions can moderate the relationship between green finance and sustainable economic growth. So quickly, by way of literature, as I indicated, green finance is any form of finance from both public and private sources that can green the economy or can support green investment, green infrastructure, green agriculture, and so on and so forth. And it's very important in driving sustainable development. So we think that while financial development, the literature in that area is quite rich, and therefore by intuition, green finance should be able to play the same or similar role. If financial development, as we've seen in the literature, can support growth, then we can infer that green finance should be able to support sustainable growth. All right. So as we direct capital towards eco-friendly projects, green finance should be able to boost innovation, lower carbon emission, and enhance economic resilience. Now, also look at the aspects of the literature that discuss institutions and the role that institutions play in explaining economic growth. And we think that institutional quality is crucial for guiding economies towards balanced development that, of course, can engineer growth. The strong institutions can or will foster a stable and transparent environment, and that should be able to support the implementation of green projects and initiatives. And so that's why we think that it can play that moderating role in causing green finance to support growth. Now, well, we've seen studies that have indicated that strong relationship between institutions and growth, and the literature is really replete with that particular finding or that position, that strong institutions, of course, can support economic growth. And weak institutions, of course, can hinder sustainable economic growth, and because you know that weak institutions may be fertile grounds for inefficiencies, and that can dampen growth. So as we put green finance, institutions, and growth together, we believe that this is an area that can be identified as gap in the literature, and that's what we've been interested in doing. We believe that institutional quality or strong institutions can moderate the relationship. All right, so that's what we tried to do. So let me just skip the literature at this point and look at the model that we use. So our baseline model looks at green finance, institutional quality, and how they independently explain sustainable economic growth. So in our first equation, we employ 3 different estimation techniques, including food, OLS, GLS estimations. And then we build on this and believe that there's possible, dynamic endogeneity among the variables. Okay, so we then employ dynamic system GMM. Of course, we believe that previous year's growth, okay, and that's pretty standard, can explain subsequent years' growth. So to investigate the threshold effect, we take a squared term of green financial development. So we have sustainable economic growth, a log form, and then we have green financial development, and then we take the log term, the square term of green financial development, and then we have our institutional quality as an independent variable and try to gauge how these explain sustainable economic growth. Then for the interaction term, so in equation 4, of course, we use the same model, but this time we interact institutional quality with green financial development to see how that also impacts on sustainable economic growth. So we know that the threshold point of the green financial development, we express that in the form as indicated on the board. Now, based on equation 3, the effect of a change in green financial development on sustainable economic growth also expressed as follows. Now, in our set equation, we expect that a change in green financial development should lead to a change in the level of sustainable economic growth at the changing level of institutional quality. So in an economy with, or a country with very weak institutional quality, we believe that the impact of green finance will be different from a system where institutional quality is strong. Or if you even look at the same economy over time, if they're able to improve on internal structures, then we can start experiencing some significant effect between green finance and sustainable economic development. So just quickly by way of the variables. So sustainable economic growth is defined as GDP per growth. We have GDP per capital growth, and then we have that is picked from a World Development Indicator database. The green finance or green financial development is defined as the ratio of climate development finance, or come in any form, grant, loan, a green loan, could be green bonds issued, that scaled by GDP. Then institutional quality, I mean, we use the standard index made up of 6 indicators: rule of law, government effectiveness, control of corruption, political stability, regulatory capital, and voice of accountability. And we think that this adequately captures the strength of the institutions in any country. Then we control for a standard determinant, I mean, FDI, total investment, industry, employment, financial openness, and then private sector credit. All right, so I'll skip this and just go straight to the empirical results. So from this, we found that, of course, I mean, previous years' growth will impact positively on current year's growth. And we noticed that green finance does not have a linear relationship with sustainable economic growth. So initially, the relationship is negative and significant for that matter. But if you look at the square term, it turns positive. All right, so that shows that relationship, curve relationship. Institutional quality was significant if you use the system GMM, and that was positive and as expected. And then the control variables tend to exhibit signs that are generally consistent with the literature. Now, if we come to the interaction term, we see that the relationship is positive. Okay, so we see that.
5 minutes.
Okay, is it here?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. So we see that to be positive. So it means that institutional quality moderates a positive relationship between green finance and sustainable economic growth. So what are we saying? We observe a U-shaped relationship between green finance and sustainable economic growth. Green finance actually reduces the sustainable economic growth up to a point, a threshold point, but begins to increase as an additional, if you like, injection of green finance. So initially, the relationship is negative, and then over time begins to pick up as a positive relationship. I mean, two things. It could be that initial injection of green finance may be diverted into areas that are not growth enhancing, or may not be enough to really impact positively on growth. So we make the point that average level of green finance may not be channeled into sustainable growth, but additional injection may cause that positive effect or positive sign that we want to see. We also know that institutional quality promotes sustainable economic growth, and the negative linear effect of green finance on growth, sustainable growth, is reduced by strong institution or increase in the level of institutional quality. And also, an increase in institutional quality, of course, reduces the rate at which the initial level of green finance reduces sustainable economic growth. We think that it's important, these are just preliminary recommendations, because we're still developing the paper. It's important to develop and implement effective regulation and standards for green finance to ensure that it aligns with sustainable economic growth objectives. We may encourage blended finance, okay, so combining both concessionary and commercial funding to be able to support sustainable projects and also reduce the risk of green finance crowding out other investments. We believe that collaboration among financial institutions and other stakeholders can help ensure that green finance really drives sustainable growth. We believe that by implementing these policies, government and financial institutions should be able to help reduce the negative impact of green finance on sustainable growth initially, and ensure that it supports long-term projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for a succinct presentation. The chair loves that. So do we have the discussant? Yeah. Up to 5 minutes, but less is also appreciated. Sorry.
Can I? Let me take my paper so I can take some notes.
Can I proceed or?
Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frangton Chiyemura. I'm a lecturer in international development at the Open University. In terms of my research, I work on Chinese investments in wind and solar energy in Africa. Of course, for those who were yesterday, which is very interesting and I hold dearly. So today I've been asked to be the discussant for Joshua and George's paper. And first of all, I want to thank George and Joshua for this interesting and thought-provoking piece, which looks at three very important themes and the interrelationship between them in contemporary development policy and practice. As they've already said, I think the study examines the interrelationship between green financial development, institutional quality, and sustainable economic growth across 54 African countries for periods ranging from 2004 to 2022. I think the key finding in this paper is that institutional quality positively affects sustainable growth and mitigates the initial negative impact of green finance. I think this finding is important because in addition to providing quantitative evidence to the long existing debate around the role of institutions in development, I think it also sheds light on the often ignored concept of institutional quality And this is something scholars like Akmoglu, Robinson, and others have been working on for quite some time now. Which means your finding has several policy implications, and for sake of time, I will not go into that because you've already mentioned them. So probably the next maybe 3 minutes now, 3.5 minutes. Yes, I'll share my 4 discussion points, reflections, comments, and thoughts. So firstly, I agree with your take that green finance is key for sustainable economic growth. You go on to demonstrate that an initial increase in green finance inflows leads to a decline in sustainable economic growth. However, as you proceed, doubling the levels of green financial development in recipient countries tends to promote sustainable economic growth. And on this case, or on this note, I wonder whether this is feasible from a modeling perspective to factor in the source of the green finance. All right. Currently, I think at the moment we have heated ongoing debates and discussions in development economics, with some schools of thought contending that green finance, for instance, coming from Western countries, tend to have more positive impact in the host or destination countries because it reflects much about the sending countries' institutional dynamics and quality. So I wonder if this is something you might want to consider in your paper and what implications will be. My second point is on the institutional quality. I agree with your definition you use in this paper, and I think these 6 indicators tend to be used, particularly if you're using or doing a modeling study. But however, I also wanted to kind of stretch this a little bit further. This is because I think presently, what is not featuring in your analysis is this idea, and this idea basically around thinking about the qualityness of these institutions. I wonder if you can comment a bit on the difference between strong institutions, which I found you used that in your paper, quality institutions, again, I see that being used, as well as the level of institutional development. So I see these 3 as, of course, I think probably you are interchangeably using them in your paper, but these are kind of very different topics altogether. The reason I'm saying this is that my own interpretation, for instance, of strong institution is mostly associated with the idea of having a strong political establishment in control of these institutions. And linked to this, normally these institutions, as people coming, for instance, from development economics would argue, are linked or controlled by political establishment because they have the power, the means, and the capability to easily redirect resources. Sometimes it can turn out to be efficient, sometimes it can turn out to be inefficient. So get me right, I'm not saying that this is a bad or good thing, but you might really want to kind of probably qualitatively assess this kind of the difference between these 3 typologies of your reference to institutional quality: strong, weak, and the level of development of these institutions. That said, I think in theory and in practice, the level of institutional development between and within countries is different. Take, for instance, I'll give an example of Mauritius, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Sudan. South Sudan, these have all different types of institutions that can be within that spectrum of being strong, weak, and the level of institutional development. My third point,
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, my third point is linked to your data and methods. I wanted to applaud you for using this dynamic SGM model. Because in most cases, people who try to use OLS and GLS, I think, have been found wanting particularly on controlling 3 sources of endogeneity. One of them is unobserved heterogeneity, simultaneity, and sometimes this dynamic endogeneity. And I really applaud you for actually using the GMA model because it kind of captures and controls those. However, yeah, maybe I can kind of catch up with you because I've got a few things that I really wanted to share. Yeah, but I think maybe just on that data and the methods, maybe aspects around the shocks that we had. So for instance, we had Ebola, that's 2014, 2016. We had COVID-19, and also we have the Russia-Ukraine war. And I think these have got implications in terms of green finance commitment, as well as the quality of institutions. Because during shock times, the way institutions behave can be different than during normal times.
Okay.
That's the final point. Okay.
I'm sorry to be so authoritarian, but I want that we get our lunch. I've been told that we can have 1 question if anyone has a quick question. We don't have to have it. Yes, there, please. Briefly, please.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. I find the work very interesting. But then I have something to say on the estimation. Now, I've used these world governance indicators on several of my papers, and it has serious problems on the variables are highly correlated. Now, you have done a summation of the indicators. Now, there are only two ways. Because they're highly correlated, each enters into the equation separately. If not, you do a principal component analysis. When you do it as an index, the way you've done, there are interpretation problems. Like now, the finding is that institutional quality matters. But which one among them? Because theoretically, government effectiveness, regulatory quality, rule of law, corruption, political stability, theoretically each matters differently on sustainable growth. Not all of them will be relevant on the estimation of the results. You do pooled regression, you do static fixed, then you do dynamic. Now, as long as you have the AERC dependent variable, you can't do this other pooled static fixed. You straight go to the dynamic. And then there is no justification why you cannot use the Alano and bond rather than Alano and Bova, the system. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, thank you. I think rather than ask you to respond now, Joshua, I think it's better we move to the second presentation. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you for the presentation. So the second, our second presentation is Sandrine and Pia's discussant.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Again, no more than 20 minutes and less is welcome.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sandrine Kablan. I'm very happy to be here before you today to present this paper that I have written jointly with Victor Morende and Atina Petropoulou. So the title of this paper is the following: Bank Stability, Bank Business Model, and the Financial Resource Curves. As you can see, it's not directly related to the topic of the conference, but still it is indirectly related to, because many of you knows that African countries are resource-based countries. They export natural resources, and one of their main clients is China. So this paper will feed the debate by giving some idea about the relationship between Africa and China, and also it will give some idea about the future evolution of those countries, because here what we are tackling is an issue related to the financial sector, which is a very important sector in economic development. Again, before beginning, I'd like to tell you that this paper complements two other papers that have been made on the same topic, financial resource curves. The two previous paper was grasping the financial resource curves under the angle of firms. And now what we are doing here is to analyze the financial resource curves under the angle of banks. So let me begin by recall what is the financial resource curves. So the financial resource curves has been first highlighted in the literature by Beck in 2011. He highlighted that countries rich in natural resources and have less developed financial system. He also pinpointed the fact that banks evolving in natural resource-rich country display high profitability were better capitalized, and on the contrary, they were riskier and they distribute less credit. So after Beck, many economists analyze the financial resource curve. Some of them pinpoint the impact of natural resource price volatility on bank fragility. either show how low macroeconomic performance due to the reserves curves translate to the banking system through credit defaults, deposit shrinking, and then bank instability. So all these economists use bank aggregate data. To the best of our knowledge, there is only one paper, the paper of Beck and Poleke in 2023, that used bank level data to address the issue of financial reserves curves, but they just confirm previous finding on aggregate data. So here what we are doing is to rely on bank level data, but also on the literature related to bank risk management to address the issue of financial reserves curves. So the research question we are trying to ask in this paper is, how does bank risk management help in explaining the financial reserves curves? So the novelty of our study is to help understanding how banks' behavior, namely through the choice of their business model and the choice of their credit policy, how their behavior is at the heart of the financial reserves curves. So before going to the empirical literature, to the empirical analysis, sorry, let me tell you a bit about two strands of the literature on which we rely on to make our analysis. So the first one is, of course, the literature related to financial reserves curves, and the second one is the literature related to bank risk management. So for the literature on financial reserves curves, as I said, many over pinpoint financial instability faced by resource-rich countries. They show that natural resources price were subject to shocks, were subject to strong volatility, and this volatility is easily transmitted to the banking system. And they also pinpoint the low level of intermediation and low level of financial development. As for the literature on bank risk, there are some, it explains that it gives one of the explanation of the bank risk that occur in the banking sector is the fact that this banking system is characterized by a certain market structure and also opacity. They talk about competition, concentration, market power, and they explain that in their daily activity, banks face risk, so they have to manage this risk. And the way they will do it is through the choice of their business model. So they will use this business model to assess, to contain a risk, to deal with instability. So for our part, we rely on this literature and the model used on the bank risk management literature. The model given to assess the bank risk management in order to address the financial reserves curves. So we depart from the model of Köhler and Fosu. In this model, the author relate a bank risk stability measure. So this is the Z-score in our model. So the Z-score for bank I, country J, and year T will be related to the business model of the bank, some bank-specific variable, and some country-specific variable. So to the original model of Köhler and Fosu, we add the variable of interest, which is total rents as a share of GDP. We consider the level of total rents and then the square of total rents lagged by one period. And we also include in the model the credit policy of bank. Now we derive from model 1, model 2 by including marginal effects coming from total rent through bank business model and through also bank credit policy. And again, we derive a third model, which is model 2, in which we will include the triple cross effect of bank business model, the credit policy, and tolerance. Now, very quickly, before going to the interpretation of our results, let me present you briefly the data and summary statistics. Here you can see that we made some mean tests, mean statistical difference tests, and you can see that there is a significant statistical difference between resource-based country, I mean all the statistics, between resource-based country and non-resource-based country. And it's consistent with previous finding in the literature, which is the fact that in terms of profitability, capitalization, resource-based country are more profitable, better capitalized, they display higher risk, and they distribute less credit. Now, just let's now interpret our results. So this is model 1. I'm not presenting all the variable, I'm just presenting the most relevant one. So what you can see here is the control variable, the country control variable are consistent with the literature, but more importantly, what we can see is the fact that the variable of interest, tolerance, is positive, the level of tolerance is positive, but the square of tolerance is negative and significant, which shows that tolerance will impact negatively bank stability after a certain threshold. And again, what is important to notice here is when we control for depth of credit information and legal rights, the significance of the square of tolerance disappears. This is consistent with the literature. Indeed, in the literature, many authors have pinpointed the fact that the strength of institution is very important in dampening the financial resource curse. So here, depth of credit information measure the dissemination of information about firms' reliability, and legal rights allow to grasp the trustworthiness between lenders and borrowers. So it means that if we consider the regulatory environment, the stronger it will be, the most it will be able to dampen the financial resource curse. Again, when we go to model 2, I say that model 2 is model 1, to which we will add the marginal effect. The marginal effect coming through the credit policy and the marginal effect coming through the business model. So business model caused by income structure of the bank, and the business model also caused by the funding structure of the bank. So what we can see here is concerning the income structure of the bank, it is negative with the 2 first columns, but with the remaining column, when we control for real interest rate, the sign changes, it becomes positive, and this can be explained by the literature. But most importantly here, we can see that there is a negative marginal effect that goes from tolerance through the bank credit policy and also the business model, but especially the funding structure of the bank. And again, we can see that we have the same pattern that we observe with model 1. That is for the 2 last column when we control for depth of credit information and also legal rights. And this is the coefficient of square of tolerance is no more significant, but still the marginal effects, the negative marginal effects remain significant, which means that improving the regulatory environment doesn't delete completely the financial resource curse, but it dampens it. And again, for the third model, it's the second the model 2, to which we include the triple crossed variable, total rents, bank credit policy, and bank business model grasped by the funding structure, bank funding structure, and again, the bank total rents, the triple cross variable with total rents, bank credit policy, and the income structure of the bank. So here it's not significant, but still model 3, the result of model 3 is consistent with the previous model 2 and model 1. So now we turn to some robustness checks. So what we do now is a placebo test. So what are we doing here concretely? We are testing model 1, model 2, model 3 with a sample of countries that display share of total rents as a share of GDP that is inferior to 5%. So as you can see, the significance of the coefficient of square of total rent disappear, as well as the negative marginal effects, the significance of the marginal effects. So this confirms our previous results. We made a lot of robustness checks related to the literature of natural resources, as well as robustness check related to the bank stability risk literature. So they are all consistent with our previous results. I'm just going to show you 2 of these robustness checks. So we consider as dependent variable another definition of the Z-score, the definition used by Lepetit and Strabel. And as you can see, we have the same pattern. And again, we split the Z-score into its 2 components, the risk-adjusted profit and the capital, the risk-adjusted capital, and it is also consistent with our previous results. So now we can kind of making a small discussion and a conclusion. So we confront our result to the literature, previous literature on financial resource curves. So what we can say here is the novelty in our article is to consider bank business model and credit policy with micro-level data to better understand the issue of financial resource curves. So by doing so, we are able to explain the fact that financial resource curves appears after a certain threshold of total rents. Second, we are able to explain why banks in resource-based countries have larger exposure to financial instability. So indeed, when whatever the bank business model a bank in a resource-based country will choose, this business model will be less effective in dealing with risk management in containing instability. And finally, we are also able to explain why there is more credit rationing in resource-based country. This is because banks in resource-based country are keener to lend to firms that evolve in the resource sector. Why? Because this is the booming sector. So they don't really, by doing so, they don't really exercise their expertise in credit risk management and distribution. So at the end of the day, this will lead to low financial development. So this can be an explanation to this issue of low financial development. And finally, we think that it is important as a policy recommendation, we think that it is important to enforce information access to banks as for firms' reliability, and also to enforce trustworthiness through the protection of borrowers and lenders' rights. So thank you for your attention, and your comments are welcome in order to improve the paper.
Thank you, Sandrine. And thank you for keeping to a bit less than 20 minutes. Thank you. Pia? Great. 5 minutes maximum, please.
I try to be very quick.
Okay, that's what the chair loves.
Thank you for your very interesting presentation, and I cannot say enough of this, but it's very interesting because we are going back to development. We have resource-rich countries, and we all know that this is a high-risk strategy. How do we get them into a more balanced development? So therefore, this is a very interesting and important issue. So I enjoyed reading it quite a lot. However, I have some concerns that I think you can absolutely address. No problems with that. But where you might potentially be very careful in phrasing it. My specific concern is that your research returns are on a country level, while your set scores are on individual bank level. So when you interact bank loan and whatever else you have on individual bank data with country level rent from natural resources, you effectively do compare different banks in different countries. And that needs to be spelled out, I think, to make readers aware of what you are actually comparing. And with that comes the problem that there are regulatory issues. I don't know how banks are free to choose their own kind of business model. So that is a concern you would need to address as well. I would like to see in the final version, for instance, more control over Islamic banks. I've seen that you have done your robustness checks, but I would highlight that because you have a cross-country study. Yeah, and I would also like to see a more robustness check for oil-rich countries, because oil-rich countries are so rich, they don't need actually financial development, while we have mineral-rich countries which might not be in the same position. So I would like to see something like that you control for, and then try to interpret the results accordingly. So that's that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. And again, thank you for being succinct. That's much appreciated. In the interest of equity, I think we should have the same policy of allowing one question, one quick question. If we have one. Okay, one quick comment from me. I was just a bit concerned in some of those results, how much the numbers of observations were fluctuating across the results, and to what extent some of the changes in the models are driven by the fact that you have different samples, different numbers of observations in the models you're comparing. The numbers of observations at the bottom are quite different. I think in the interest of equity, Sandrine will not let you respond at the moment because I think let's move to the third presentation. I apologize for that, but let's move to the third presentation. There may be a chance for people to respond at the end, but please. So I think we may not have a discussant for the third presentation, which is unfortunate. Which is unfortunate for you, but again, if you can present in up to 20 minutes.
Andy, I'm here. Eh? Can you hear me?
Ah, yes. Okay. Oh, good. Yes, yes,
So
yes.
we do have discussant.
Oh, we do have a discussant. Wonderful. Welcome, George.
Hi, Andy. Glad to see you.
Good to see
Yes.
you. Good to see you. Good to see you too. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. We are Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our papers, and then we will be. Xiaoxi will be presenting the papers. I'm just going to introduce and then sit down and then let the Xiaoxi continues. And then this is a joint work with myself, the Xiaoxi, and John is the. So since we have 20 minutes, I have to be very, very quick, and then let Xiaoxi to talk a bit in details. As standard, we are going to motivation, talk about I don't know how much we will have time, literature review model, and especially calibration and impulse response analysis and conclusions. This is beautiful cartoon of actually is the review or present what we are doing, and then was sort of our planet in the way we are interacted, and is the to see what's happening in the recent period is about climate change, especially on that. And the model that we are really looking at it more in the about the financial institution impact, or what the financial institution is step in. So is the let the Xiaoxi to talk, and then I'm in here.
Okay, thank you, Yene. Thanks for your first part about the overview for this paper, and I will continue about our presentation. Now, I will turn to the first part about the motivation. This is a timeline of the international efforts related with the climate change and finance. So as we know that the concept of sustainable development was first given in 1987, and then that the United Nations Environment Program, they highlight the importance of the financial industry to handle the climate change issues. So after that, we have many actions, agreements, and some activities, such like Agenda 21, Kyoto Protocol, Equator Principle, and the Paris Consensus, and also some conference, such like COP 26, 27, 28, as we know. And one of the most important regulations recently, that is 2030 Agenda. So they have such like that picture, we have the Sustainable Development Goals here, related in 17 goals. And that's in Africa. The African Union has put forward Agenda 2063, says also align with the goal of the Sustainable Development Goals. So in this way, we want to know how African government, what can they do to achieving this goal? Why we mention the government? Because that's the climate change, they have their nature, because they are the public goods compared with the private goods. They are non-competitive and also non-exclusive goods. So we face the free rider inside. So in this way, such like the Adam Smith had mentioned that the government must do something about it. So in our paper, we have 4 elements in here. So that make our paper is different. I just briefly explain about it. Firstly, is that we face the financial friction here. We use the BGG model based on Bernanke model. So in this way, we know that the information asymmetry besides the firms and also the government. So we face the financial friction over there. And after that, we want to say, how about the physical support? We use the soft budget constraint in here. And later, here, with the heterogeneity of the firm, that's the key point in our model. So we have some formal documents that distinguish the green and brown firms. So we choose the task force on climate-related financial disclosure, this standard form, to distinguish the green and brown firms here. So after that, we make the heterogeneity of the banks. That not means the banks, that means although we know that the banks have the portfolio for the green and brown loan. So now we have the brown loan, we also named it, okay, brown loan for the brown banks. Okay, the green loan for the green banks, just easily to distinguish that. So after that, after the model, we have three shocks here. We want to compare the conventional monetary policy and the unconventional monetary policy, and as well as the fiscal support, to compare three of them to face which one is much more effective to target about the climate change. So in this way, the conventional monetary policy, we just use the reserve requirement ratio here. And then the unconventional monetary policy, we use the green credit policy here. After that, the fiscal support, we use the soft budget constraint. The brief about the literature review. The concept of the green credit that comes from the 2002, that he mentioned that the financial institution provide preferential credit benefits to the green sustainable firms. And in 1980s, that Cornell make the first definition of about the soft budget constraint to support for the firms, especially the state-owned firms. So this is a physical support. After that, we want to know the financial development and also the economic growth, the relationship between them. Such like the Bachelot and Krugman, they mentioned, okay, they still have strong relationship and a positive relationship between each other. And after that, the Bernanke model won the Nobel Prizes. So he highlighted that the financial accelerator theory in the model, in the DSGE model. So our paper mainly based on BGG model. Okay, now we can turn to the model. We have the 7 sectors here to make the general equilibrium here. So before the model, I would like to show you the framework for this one. Although it seems like complex, but okay, it's fun. It's a general one. So such like from the household, we know that they supply the labor force to the firms, and then the firms also pay the wage for the household. And households can buy the goods from the retailers, and also the household will pay the taxation for the government. Others, that's like the gray and this part. This gray and brown firms, they produce, so the goods will be just the physical capital comes from wholesaler and then turn to retailer. This part just to make the price thickness here to make the theory much more close to the real life. Yeah, and then with different type of the firms, we have different type of the loan. So we just name it green and brown. So the banks just distinguish with such like, yeah, the first bank just lend the money to the green firms, and the second one is a brown one, that's the lend the money to the brown entrepreneurs. So after that, we have 3 main policies here. We want to compare which one is much more effective. So from the left side, we can say this is soft budget constraints directly from the government to the green firms. And the middle one is the green credit policy from the central bank, mainly to the banks who lend the money to the green firms. That means the green credit policy, mainly for some green loans to the green firms. And after that, we can say that monetary policy from the central bank about the reserve requirement ratio for all of the banks here. This is a conventional one. And then we can say, I know that the equation is not so attractive for you. The household, they want to maximize their utilities. And after that, we have the retailer sector, the wholesaler sector, and the capital sector. I want to describe something important here. So this is the basic Bernanke model part about the financial friction here, accelerator. So based on this part, this means a brown one. We have another, is a green one. You can see the green one, what's the difference here?
is a capital G, the G, and also, the 2G. That means the support by the government support. So this G represents the soft budget constraint. So that means the higher of this, the much more guarantee from the government. So that means the lower interest rate of these green firms will decrease. So after that, we turn to the banking sector. Also, they face the green and brown loan. In terms of the green one, we incorporate green credit policy here. So the circle one, you can see they are different. So if you want to know any detail, we can talk about later. And after that, we have the government sector as well as the market clearing. Now we turn to the calibration and steady state. In this part, we calibrate the data mainly from the 10 African countries and range from 2000 to the 2020. And after that, we have the steady state, which just show what we did and it's a work. And finally, we have the impulse response analysis. We want to know 3 of the policies, what kind of the change will affect for the climate change. First one that we want to say that the reserve requirement ratio, if they drop 1 unit, what will happen? That's all the detail inside from the individual to the firms as well as to the whole economies. And after that, we also show the change from the refinancing rate. That means the green credit policies rate. If they drop 1 unit, what will happen here? The third one is about the fiscal support increase for 1 unit. So after 3 of them, we combine together to make it much more clear to say what's the difference between 3 policies. So in this figure, we can say that the conventional monetary policy, that's the solid line, that has the weakest economic stability effect, which leads to large fluctuations in our output and also the inflation. And then we can see the unconventional monetary policy. They can stabilize economic fluctuations, and also in long term, they can reduce the long-term negative impact. After that, the fiscal support, as we know, they face the mismatch of the resource and also the price distortion. So overall, that's not so effective. And then the conclusion is that we have the lower carbon projects. So although we use the data calibrated from the African economy, so we find that the central bank refinancing, that's a green credit policy, is shown to be the most effective tool to influence the bank lending that support environment goals. Okay, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to both of you for another very succinct presentation. So thank you for 3 succinct presentations, which makes the job of the chair easier and guarantees that we're going to get our lunch on time. So, George, do you have some comments?
Yeah.
Up to 5 minutes, George.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Right. So thank you very much. So let me start by saying that the novelty of the paper is actually quite important. The search for relevant policy tools to channel climate finance in Africa. And I can tell you that according to the AdB, according to us, in 2023-2024 report, the Africa Economic Outlook, I think our estimate is that we need close to $2.6 to $2.8 trillion annually up to 2030 to finance climate action. And around that, there are other conversations, and some colleagues raised it earlier on, around climate justice and how Africa transit, and particularly around the energy issue. I'm sitting here in South Africa. I think the issue of the just energy transition in South Africa has been huge. And the concern being that Africa has not been a big emitter or polluter in that regard. But anyway, so that's kind of the novelty. Huh? Now, I think that as an academic piece, it's a very interesting paper. And so I think there are just one or two things that I'll raise in relation to that. Mine is more to do with if I were to meet the finance minister of South Africa or Kenya or Ghana and so on, what story will I be telling them exactly? And based on their experience. So the theoretical aspect and the modeling aspect and the relationship with the stylized facts is my beef. If there's any beef to have with the paper. First, I think that I think that these countries are quite diverse, and so I'm not sure if you think, for example, on regulatory regimes and how the financial sector in these countries operate. South Africa is very advanced if you compare that to, let's say, Malawi. And I wonder how those dynamics in Malawi will play out as compared to Uganda or Zambia, for that matter. So how do you take into account country specificities or control for them actually when you are doing this simulation? Okay, that's one. The second is linked. I mean, the time frame for the data set is running from 2000 to 2020. And within that time frame, I am very suspicious that there must have been several structural breaks. One of them is the 2008-2009 financial crisis, which is halfway of the data set. And again, that certainly would have influenced the way how the banking sector, the financial sector behaved or reacted. The other thing that could have influenced how these banks or the system operate are actually political cycles. Many of these countries have had multiple elections, except for maybe Uganda. Victor can confirm. That's the only country, I think. But the others have had several elections, including some of them contentious elections. For example, Kenya in 2007, where things were not, handled quite smoothly in that regard. So the other thing that I also have question on is with respect to fiscal policy. Again, the choice of the countries matters. I think that most of these countries are having issues with their fiscal spaces, and so it's noble to obviously I can see the effectiveness of fiscal policy, but I am more suspicious of monetary policy because for reasons I already highlighted. But even with fiscal policy, you have the issue of debt. I mean, I know that the data set for Kenya doesn't capture what has happened recently, but everybody watched what happened in Nairobi on the streets when people were protesting about, a tax act that was being enacted in that country. And so
one minute more, George. 1 minute.
I'm almost done. So my point is that we need to check for these country specificities. I think finally on the issue of giving cheap loans to banks to lend on to the so-called climate loans, my experience, at least as the ADB, if you give money without really detailed supervisory capabilities, they're likely to lend the money on to those sectors where they will make the highest profit. So the supervisory burden on the central bank is likely to rise. So let me stop there. I have written comments which I can email it to the colleagues, and they can take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Much appreciated. So in the interest of equity of treatment with the other papers, if there's one question that someone would like to ask. Yes, please.
Okay, I really learned a lot from the theoretical paper, but from my empirical research experience, I have a simple question to just share with you, or just can I get some feedback maybe? Because that you know that companies with higher carbon emission intensity typically face higher or greater climate risk impacts. So literature has already found that companies with higher climate risk exposure also experience higher external financial costs, whatever in debt or in equity financing. That's what is already found in empirical studies. So as I remembered, one of my module talk about the financial market efficient hypothesis, which may be taught by Victor in my master class, I think. And that module said that if the financial markets are efficient, so the external financing cost of companies reasonable reflect the climate risk they face. So that means the climate change risk has already been priced in the market. So that means the efficient market hypothesis. So I just wondering whether any further intervention by central banks lead to financing costs for low carbon companies falling below market equilibrium levels, thereby causing resources misallocation. That means maybe too many resources being allocated to low carbon companies, because I found in the result you have that the low carbon companies will have more and more output compared to the brown companies. So that's just the simple question.
Thank you very much. I've been very authoritarian with the other authors. Maybe Joshua and Sandrine would like to come back down to the front. If you would like to respond to the comments you've had, you can do so now. But perhaps if Joshua and Sandrine can come down to the front. You guys want to respond first?
Yes, sure.
George's comment or that? Yes, you know, 1 or 2 minutes, please. Sorry.
More than Andy, so you basically save the few minutes so that they can respond.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Let me start with your comments or your observations in there. Sort of assuming that if the financial market efficient, we don't need anything regulation or anything else. This is what I understood, but it's how efficient financial market, how efficient within the information asymmetry, how much we can understand these things. Well, this is another sort of a research area to talk. But the way I can answer your question immediately, carbon emission is very clear. Carbon is the carbon produce or carbon the firm that make the produced is clear, undisputable. They can, our scientists, colleagues will know the production of this material, how much carbon they produce. So is this information should be used to bring any policy issues, and doesn't matter what is that. So that is the sort of the model we try to bring it up. Yes, it's quite general. As our discussant is mentioned about a country-specific information. Yes, we can improve the model to. This is very flexible with a country, absolutely with specific country. Ghana, we can put it in there, or Kenya or South Africa. So these are the flexibility that I think the model has, that we are innovate or we extend the existing Bernanke's models.
You had 1 minute.
No worry, I see you.
Okay, so thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments. So, okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. So, as you said, we are going to make an effort to better phrase our modeling so that people can better understand. Concerning the interaction between bank level data and country level data, I think we will think about that, but in the literature of related to the banking system, I think it's something that is usually done mixing bank level data and country level data. So we will think about that with Victor and Atina, how we can improve it, if it's something that we can rephrase and rewrite it properly in our